Bill Clinton, through an executive order, created a federal law which had the effect of pressuring your local hometown bank to make bad loans. What does that have to do with the Federal Reserve? Nothing. What does it have to do with AIG or Citigroup or Bank of America that were bailed out? Nothing. Bill Clinton, through an executive order, not legislation, not with the consent of Congress, there was no vote, there was no debate. Bill Clinton, toward the end of his second term, before leaving office, signed an executive order creating, in effect, a federal law. It functions just as federal law. Banks must comply or they will be penalized big bucks. They mustn't even be seen as possibly practicing discrimination against borrowers. They must bend over backwards to loan money to people in such a way as to avoid a lawsuit accusing the bank of racial discrimination. Yes, I said racial. This has nothing to do with the Fed. This has nothing to do with AIG and bonuses paid by AIG. This is the beginning of the meltdown. Racial discrimination on the part of banks. Banks didn't dare lose a court case being sued by ACORN and similar groups, and to avoid prosecution or court case to settle out of court, they would just bend over backwards to comply with the pressure put on them by ACORN. These bad loans were in the form of mortgages for low-income home buyers. Quite often, poor people, they were white, they were black, they were Hispanic, they were whoever. But Freddie and Fannie, Freddie Mae, Freddie Mac, the two government-sponsored entities, then bought these mortgages and backed them by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And what that amounts to is the taxpayers are on the hook to bail them out. These mortgage products, repackaged mortgage products, were now backed up by the federal government, by the U.S. Treasury, by the dollar. Thereby, after which point, other banks could repackage derivatives of these mortgages, which I don't understand, and I expect most of you don't understand. But then a Ponzi scheme, a house of cards was built on this, spreading this problem worldwide, because investors outside the United States bought these repackaged mortgages, mortgage products based on mortgages, backed up by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that originated in your hometown by banks that were cowered into lending money to people who probably could not pay it back. It just almost was certain that they would not be able to pay it back. Now, all this is backed up by you, the taxpayer. It's now safe for investors to speculate on these investment products. Instead of investing in iron ore or orange juice or a pharmaceutical company, an investor could safely buy these products, these derivatives, and get a return safe because it was backed up by the U.S. government. It was guaranteed. When the mortgages began to default, when all these people who took out all these home loans began to default in huge numbers, it's set off like a raging fire that just ate the guts out of the banking system. At which point Hank Paulson rushed to the president, George Bush, and said, "We're in big trouble. We've got to act now. We've got a huge problem. We've got to restore liquidity, inject confidence," all these fancy words, but basically dump money on this problem because all the banks are collapsing, and then the collapse is going to spread like dominoes, brrr, and the whole world will be thrown into horrible chaos. We're on the brink of a great, huge depression, an economic shutdown, a huge mess. We've got to do something quick. And so George Bush decided to do this first bailout, and that was only the tip of the iceberg. We saw that it was even bigger. So Barack Obama infused more money and took over, began to control banks, and then tried to get the economy going again. The economy had slowed because credit dried up. Tried to get the economy going again with spending. It so happens that most of this spending really is not of a nature that will actually stimulate the economy, especially not immediately. And it's huge spending, as if being associated with ACORN from day one and knowing about this from day one, from before day one, and if this meltdown was an act of sabotage carried out by leftist elements in our government, in our society, who are a fifth column aiding and abetting the enemy, which is worldwide communism, and its effort to destroy capitalism. That's their goal. Their goal is to destroy capitalism. They believe capitalism produces wealth, and they want it. They want to redistribute it. Their system doesn't produce wealth. They attack capitalism not because it doesn't work, but because they don't like the way it fails to distribute the wealth. Congressmen such as Maxine Waters and Barney Frank resisted all efforts by the federal regulators who saw this coming years ago. To lessen the risk of a looming potential meltdown, they resisted. They said, "There's not a problem with Freddie Mac, and especially not Fannie Mae under the superb leadership of Franklin Raines." And even one congressman blurted out, "This is a political lynching of Franklin Raines." I've got a recording of it. It's off of a video on YouTube. "This is a political lynching of Franklin Raines," he said. These Congress people resisted the regulators who wanted to avert the disaster that ensued when thousands of these borrowers defaulted. I maintain that these members of Congress are corrupt, and I maintain that they or somebody tried to shift the blame elsewhere, and thus the manufactured outrage over bonuses paid to AIG. Who gives a flip? Those are just pennies compared to the dollars that were spent on this problem. Dozens of people are guilty of a conspiracy to defraud the people of the United States of America, but this is beyond just criminal conduct. I maintain that this is actually a case of subversion such as you would find in a time of war between enemy combatants, such as occurred during the Cold War. This is plainly an act of sabotage. This is orchestrated. This was caused. This is no accident. This is an act of economic sabotage carried out by the enemy within, a fifth column of communist supporters who provide aid and comfort to the enemy. They've always been in this country since the Cold War started, which started about 1920 or 1930, before we entered World War II. So long as there have been communists trying to cripple and extort and loot the wealth from capitalist countries, there has been this Cold War. The enemy is worldwide communism. That enemy has hidden supporters embedded throughout our country. Of course, the media, of course, our schools, from the highest to the lowest levels of our educational system, everywhere in government, local level, state level, Congress, Senate, and the White House.